Hey everybody, here for a second revision of the PS1Digital install. I'm going to go over the kit content. It's a little bit different than before. Still have the main board, still have the same normal antenna as before. This time the 3D printed mount has two washers attached to it. You just go ahead and break those off and then just separate them into three pieces. And then the flex cables are going to come in a panel like this. These are pretty easy to remove. So with the black side up, we're going to remove the GPU flex first. We're just going to pull up. And then when you get to the end, go ahead and fold it over so it makes a nice tear on the edges. I don't know if we'll be able to see that. If there is any excess on the edges, take your finger like that and they'll pull right off. Go ahead and pull these off. They just tear off. Nice and easy. Set these back over here. Just always pull from the one end. And you got your four flex cables. And then I've got a PS1 here that I've never opened. It is brand new, or not brand new to me. I did test it, and it did work, did boot up, at least to the BIOS screen. So that'll be good enough test for this. So we're going to go ahead and do a teardown of it. Get this more in the middle here. Get this stuff off to the side. This is a PU18 board. At least I hope it is. It's a 5501 console, so there's always that chance someone could have swapped it. Go ahead and keep all my screws in the case. I'm going to try and make this a pretty quick video, so I'm not going to go into explaining a bunch of stuff. And always reference the red install docs as you do a install of this, because if there is any changes after this, it'll all be written in install docs, which are linked below in the description. So one first thing we need to do on the metal plate is this right here. This little stub needs to be flat. Got some better cutters here, so we're just going to take some normal side cutters, snip it so you can see it's just completely flush. And then the other part is, use a random tool for this, is this little notch right here needs to be pushed up out of the way. So just take a pair of pliers, push it up out of the way. I am using wire strippers, but it works. So that is flush. Go ahead and set that to the side. I'm going to go ahead and pull the board out now. Just remove all the screws around the edges. Whole motherboard will come out. Go ahead and move this off to the side. This copper we can get rid of. We're no longer going to use it. And now we're going to pull this heat shield off. There's two spots here, one there, one here, one there, and the one on the back. To do this, I'm just going to put my iron up pretty hot. We're going to go 420 degrees Fahrenheit, or I'm sorry, Celsius. So we're going to just put this in the metal, and we're just going to lift up and just let it let the solder turn back to solid state before you drop it down. Now this one over here is actually a through hole, so you got to go up a little bit higher. But so far no problems. I recommend doing this one first. It's a little easier. I didn't totally get it, but we'll get this one. And really we're just heating this area up so this lifts off. You notice I didn't even apply any solder to this. They do come out pretty easy. Got a little spider's web underneath. Go ahead and throw that away. Next step is we need to remove this serial port. I'm going to do that with a hot air tool. You can use a solder sucker or use an actual just braid with solder. That works as well. But first I'm going to just apply some leaded solder, fresh leaded solder to this. This will help it flow better when I heat it up. Melt the other solder. Alright, so that's done. And then I'm going to use my hot air, which I find to be the easiest way. There's no critical components in this area when you're blowing this way. Let's go ahead and adjust the camera here. I'm going to shoot this off the table because this will be easier for me to grab it. And I'm going to put my hot air extremely hot. I'm going to put it at 400 C, maximum air. And this is going to heat this area of the board extremely fast. Let's see if I can show this better here. I'm going to work off the end of my table so I can grab the serial port with some pliers, and I'm just going to heat this area up. And this air is extremely hot, so you don't want to be on this area that long. So I'm really just focusing on the two outer grounds. Those will be the hardest part. And I'm kind of barely wiggling this port. Not putting much force. Comes right out. And then what you want to do is you want to keep this, because we will, when we zoom back here, when we release the serial port adapter, you'll be able to make a plug-in an ESP will plug into this. So you want to keep this, do not lose it. So now we're just going to go ahead and clean up these edges on this. Just going to throw a little liquid flux. This is a Kester 595T. Now my pin tool right now is still pretty warm, but I'm going fast. So a lot of the heat's not necessarily flowing right into the board. There's no magic temp. It's kind of what works for you. If you're a slow worker, you need lower temp. If you're a fast worker, you can use a higher temp. And we're just sucking the solder out of this. Don't really have to get it all, but it's nice to get some of the old solder out of there. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and just take some, this is just isopropyl alcohol, 99.9 alcohol from MG Chemicals. I just like to keep it in the spray bottle, that way it never gets contaminated. I'm just going to spray this down a little bit. Just clean it up. Alright. Now we're going to go ahead and flip her over. We're going to install a couple fluxes. First flex we're going to do is the serial port flex. I'm going to put some like this. You can see that it says on the flex itself. Let me see if I can get a little, as close as I can get without going to a different mount. I'm going to go ahead and move this a little closer to me though. So you can see all the flex cables say solder this side up. So you should mess that up. But what we're going to do is we're going to fill one hole in here in the top right corner. And what that's going to allow us to do is when we set this flex cable on top, it's going to kind of keep a little bit of a mount. If I can pick it up. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and just set it flat. Use that little mount. Just solder it on. So solder another hole on. I'm kind of holding this down over here so the cable sits flat. You want to make sure it sits flat when it's soldered. Okay, that's on. I'm going to go ahead and clean it off. Let's see. Nice clean joints. This is on a PU18, there is one part you need to remove on the GPU flex. It's this resistor located right here, right next to this oscillator. I would recommend you reference the written docs, as these are really highlighted really well and easy to see. I'm just using some hot tweezers to do that, but you can use a normal iron with some solder on the tip and touch both sides at the same time. And now we're going to go ahead and do the controller flex, which is right here. And we're just going to go ahead and line up one side. That one side is touching. Let's see. I'm going to try and not block the camera. You can see all that flux I put down is burning off. This tip right here is set to 350C, if you guys are curious to know what temperature I'm using. However, not all tips are the same, or not all irons are the same, so some 350 may be different than other 350. Just keep that as a warning. And what we're going to do is we're just going to use some tweezers, push this down. Just going to tack it in place. Alright, that moved up a little bit, so we're going to push that back down. Put a little bit more flux. Tip off. Now I'm doing this install pretty fast, but if this is your first time, definitely take it slow. There's no rush, so just feel free to pause the video, do whatever you need to do. And like I said, on this cable it also says solder this on this side, so it flips over. Next we're going to do the audio cable, which is going to go right here. This is a different cable from the previous video. There's a cutout, so you do not need to remove the components right here. The audio cable is 0.65 in pin spacing, so it's not as tough as the GPU, but it's still pretty tough. So I'm going to try and just tack this in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a clean pin, no solder, and I'm just going to set it in this spot. Get it lined up. Just hold on one second, I gotta get my face close here. And I'm just tacking it in. I'll move away here in a second, but I missed it. I'm going to put a little bit of solder on my tip, just a little bit. Sometimes you can get away with no solder initially, depending on how much solder is on the chip itself. So we're going to put this back on. We're just going to touch it. And I almost have most of it on. I just kind of slowly tacked it. But I want to get in here and really look at it here. And really you need some type of magnification to check these after you're done. Whether that's a little eye jewel glass or something. I'm going to go ahead and pull my microscope up here and take a look at the points. Let me put my light on. And I think it would work, but it's not super clean. I'm going to touch up the points with just some rubbing or with some flux. Because you can touch it up really fast with this. Make sure there's no bridges. Alright, push this out of the way. And I'm going to go ahead and clean up these areas. Use a little bit of a toothbrush here, just some light pressure. Then we use my paper towel, just kind of soak up any excess liquid. Let me zoom in to see, so you guys can really see what the joints look like on. Actually, I'll leave that off. I was going to put a different lens on. Let's see, can you guys? Nope, you can't. Let me put this lens on real quick. I got a little macro lens that works pretty well. And that's what the joints look like. So next step is we're going to do the GPU flex. This is definitely the hardest out of all the flexes. This is the one that you want to take your most time with. Let's see. Let's see if we can get a better shot of that. Alright. So this is what we're going to do. I am going to stop the camera and mount it on my microscope so you guys can see what I'm doing underneath that, and I'll be right back. Alright, we're back on the scope. Hopefully it's not too shaky. So you can see that there is a little bit of a gray pad right, or a copper pad right here. So that's actually going to turn into pad 1, where previously we started straight on to the first leg right here. We're actually going to use that other copper pad as support. So the flex is going to sit just like that. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to put some flux down. Let me zoom out a little bit so you can get an overall view of this. I'm going to take a pin with just a tiny amount of solder on it. And by tiny, I mean tiny. And then we're going to go ahead and line this up. And then what I like to do is I like to tack, sorry my finger's in the way, I'm going to tack the center. And then so then when you solder, you kind of want to work your way in to out. And I do not recommend drag soldering. These pins are super fragile on this chip, and if you drag, it's actually really easy to grab them and pull them. And so this is looking pretty crappy right now, but that's okay. We'll go back and touch it up here. I'm going to put a little bit more solder on my tip. I'm going to just do a little bit more flux on this side, make sure it didn't dry out. And then now, this little side wants to pop up. I'm going to go ahead and hold it down with some tweezers. And then I'm just going to kind of work my way outwards. If I was to like solder the outside and go in, there may be like a little gap of it not being aligned perfectly right. So now I'm just going to go over every pin. Probably zoom in a little bit more now as I do this. Go over every pin. Need some more flux on this side. I'm just going to touch every single one. It's kind of cool seeing the little smoke cover there on the camera. Alright, so these are starting to look pretty good. I do need some more solder in some areas, particularly this pad over here. So I'm going to, since there was no solder on that pad originally, I'm going to go ahead and take that and add some solder to it. And then up here, this leg connects, or this little leg on the flex connects to the other copper pad up here. It does not connect to the leg. And that's just there for added support. So it does not allow the flex cable to move. Those are grounds, and they're not, sorry for the shaking. Those are grounds, they're not going very well with this small tip, so I'm going to turn up the heat a little bit. Alright, there we go. The tip's still turned up. I'm just going pretty quick on each pin, making sure we get a nice connection. Because I'm not drag soldering, as these pins are super weak. And if you're really good with drag soldering, you feel comfortable doing it, do it. But if you're not, it's really hard to break these pins apart if they touch each other. We're going to go and touch these over here. Looks like we're feeling like we're pretty dry. Let's get some flux. And then some things I want to go over is if, so let's say you get a no video on your first boot up. The points that you're going to want to check, this is assuming you get an LED light on the FPGA. These points right here, the very bottom traces, are one of the most critical. This is the clock signal right here. And then up here you've got these two that fall down, V-Sync and H-Sync. These have to be connected as well. Those are not making good connection. You will have a bad time. I'm going to touch this flex up a little bit more. There's some areas that I don't like. I'll put a little bit more solder on my tip. Let me adjust my camera here. Okay. Pull this down. Under my microscope, I have the ability to I can see exactly which pin I'm touching. I can see almost everything. You can see the solder flow into it. This probably would have been fine before, but I want to make sure all the connections are really good. Alright, we are done with that, so we are going to go ahead and move our camera back up, and so I will be right back in a second. Alright, we are back, and all cables are on. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to take our board back over. Now, if you're confident with your soldering, you always should double check these points to make sure there's no bridges. Because if you do have a short, you'll probably blow a fuse on the board. It's repairable, but I'd recommend just using a multimeter for that. So we're going to go ahead and set this in. We're going to go ahead and use our two gray washers here. Let me go ahead and zoom out here. Two gray washers that you broke off. And the board's going to set right here. We want to let's go ahead and flip these locks up. And then make sure that that goes there. I'm going to go ahead and grab two screws. We're going to go ahead and line these washers up and screw this back down. You're not trying to over tighten everything, you're just trying to make it snug. Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and hook the flexes up. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here so you get a better shot of this. I'm just going to bend over the flexes so they go in and then push down. Here's the controller flex. It turns over like so. Turns over so the black face is up. Push down. We're going to take the audio flex, push it in, push it down. Now we're going to take the GPU flex, which is right here. We're going to take it, bend it so it doesn't, so you apply less force on the bottom here. Push it in, lock it down. Now if you can see, there is a piece of adhesive strip on the bottom of this. Go ahead and pull this off the strip. And what we're going to do is we're just going to go ahead and push down on that area so it's on the chip. Sometimes the adhesive won't hold, but it's okay if it doesn't. Just put a little crease in that, and that's what we're looking for. Just so there's not a lot of force, lateral force on these pins. Crease a little bit more. Just a little bit more of a crease. And there we go. Adhesive strip is holding it down. Pins aren't going anywhere. Even if this adhesive strip breaks up like it just did, that's okay. That's still perfectly fine. Now we want to do a quick test. Go ahead and plug in your controller. Plug in the power. Zoom out so you can see me. Plug in the power. Power cables. Turn my monitor on. I need switch my HDMI cable here, so hold on 1 second. Okay, let me give this power. Let me go to HDMI on my TV. Alright, hold on 1 second. So, I'm not getting a signal. So this will be a good troubleshooting. Let me look back at my flex here, so hold on 1 second. Alright, there actually was no problem. It was just the HDMI cable was not plugged in on the back of my TV all the way. So the strobing blue light on the PS1, that means it detects all clocks and syncs, but no HDMI cable is plugged in. So if I'm to unpull this, you'll see it go into a slow blink. So we do get our PS1 boot up. And then while we're here, go ahead and plug our controller in, verify our controller works. It does. Alright, at this point, we are almost done. Go ahead and turn the console off. We're going to take our heat shield. Go ahead and unplug the console, power it. I'm going to unplug our flex to our controller right here and power. And this needs to come out. And we're just going to set this in. If there's any things that need to be cleaned off, just clean them off with your fingernail. This is going to sit in right here. Stringing. Alright. So there it is, ready to go. Then what we're going to do, actually we don't even really need to do that just yet, but we're going to go ahead and remove the top part to our thermal pad. We're going to set this on like so. Grab our screws. And there's arrows about which screws go in what spot. Actually, I just forgot something. Pull this back up. Forgot to install our Wi-Fi antenna. So this is just going to go ahead and just push right on this connector. I'm just going to route this way. Then just take it, route it through this hole, and just make sure it keeps going that way so the case doesn't smash the cable. Alright, you can see the cable is sitting right there right now. I'm going to go ahead and screw this on. We'll take our antenna, peel back the self-adhesive strip, and we're just going to set it right there. Alright, so now we're going to put our flex cables back in. For the controller, power, and let's get in our CD-ROM, and then here we're going to set this guy back in. Set right there. We'll take our case. Oh, totally missed 2 screws on the. And it's one of those days. I missed 2 screws on the parallel port. Notice that when I took them out, and they were still there. So let's go ahead and fix that real quick. This up. Just set that to the side. Here's our parallel port screws that I forgot. Screw this back in. We're still going to make sure that cable goes out that way. It does. Set this back in. Push these in. Screw the case back on. Alright. We are good to go. So let's go ahead and put this back on. Right, that's on. HDMI is on. Flip this around. I always insert these with the lid open. I feel like sometimes they get stuck. This just fell at the back. It just kind of sits in here and then locks in place when the case drops on, like so. I'm going to go ahead and screw her in. And these ones over here. These in. Okay, let's go ahead and plug her in. She's already turned on. Plug the cable in. We should get PS1 boot up when we do. And then wherever I set my controller, back here. Make sure the OSD works, and it does. Over here, let's throw a game in it. Just because I don't even know if the CD-ROM even works on this, so we're going to find out. I just put in Spyro. What I normally like to do is I'll run a game for 30 minutes or so just to make sure there's no thermal expansion issues or anything like that. Looks like Spyro is booting. Let's see here, just making sure everything looks good. In the test info screen, during FMV sequences, you can make sure that you see all video data. Which looks like Spyro doesn't have this. But I'll try a different game. But yeah, at this point you are good to go. Thanks for watching.